does look crooked. Does it look crooked? That's what it was. I don't know how the leg moved. I'm looking at the lettering. It's not straight. It looks a little crooked. Is that what it is? Yeah, that looks better. Hi. Oh, looks a little better. It's not crooked. We'll find out here in a minute. Hi, Miss. Hi, Christina. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for the blue hearts. Tonight, we are talking about tips on learning medical terminology. Hi, Crafts. Vionet. Hello. Thank you for joining me. All right. So today is Tuesday. I hope you all had a great day. Today was quick. It was a very fast day today. But that's just the way it goes. Okay, good. I said it right. So glad. All right. So I see a lot of comments coming in already. Uh-oh, not a stressful day. Well, hopefully this will take your mind off of it. If anything will take your mind off of thinking about something, it's medical terminology. At least I like to think so anyway. That was probably my favorite in school, was medical terminology and anatomy, when I went to medical coding school. Hi, Hilda. Thank you for joining me. Craft says, been a pretty good day on my break and just a few hours left. Woo woo. Violet, I work for a OBGYN and this week is chaotic. Oh. Well, I can imagine he has waves, right? When it gets chaotic in the OBGYN clinic. Hi, Katoya. Thank you for joining me. So yes, today we're going to be talking about that huge, infamous beast that is medical terminology. A lot of people will ask me, do I really have to know this? Is this something that I really, really have to know? Yes, you really, really have to know medical terminology. Otherwise, it will catch up. Like I said, the slow way is the fast way. When you are learning all of this stuff, even though it seems slow, the more you know about the little stuff, medical terminology, even though it's a big beast, the more you know, the better off you'll be. And hopefully the screen will behave itself today and not be like last night where it was horrible, very grainy. Adriana, hoping to land a dermatology job that requires a lot of coding. You're a big help. Oh, thank you so much. Hi, Tanika. Thank you for joining me. Christina, just the job searching has been stressing me out. I've been working with a temp agency, just a matter of where to look. Vionette says, I love medical terminology. Yay! A must for coding, definitely. Yes. Hi, Ellie. Thank you for the blue heart. Hi, Carmen. Thank you for joining me. All right, a lot of new faces. Thank you all for being here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Today, we are talking about tips on learning medical terminology. Now, if you are not a medical coder, maybe you're going into another field in medical and you still need to study medical terminology, this video is for you as well. I welcome everybody. Any student that needs to learn about medical terminology, this video is for you. So let us begin. All right, the thing with medical terminology is this. This is what I tell people. The best way to learn medical terminology is, and I will give my recommendations on books before you ask. I will be leaving them when I update the description box of this video after the show. And you'll know because the thumbnail will change. I am going to be leaving all my recommendations for all the books that I recommend on medical terminology. And I will say before I get into the whole thing, you do not have to spend a lot of money to learn medical terminology. There is medical terminology learning everywhere you look, okay? So you don't have to buy expensive books. You do not have to, for my medical coders, you do not have to buy a medical terminology book that says medical terminology for medical coders. That, you know what that is? It's a gimmick. Because the exact same thing that is in that book is going to be in a medical terminology book for nurses. It's going to be in a medical terminology book, just a plain one, a medical terminology book for doctors. It is the same thing. But somebody got smart and slapped on for coders. And oh, don't be taken, guys, okay? All the books that I recommend too, that are going to be on this list, are under $50. So again, you don't have to spend a lot of money in order to learn this stuff. I'm just looking out for you guys. So the first thing that I tell people is this: when you are trying to learn medical terminology, do not try to learn whole words right off the bat. What you want to learn is the parts of the words so that you can piece them together. So you have to learn the prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Those, if you can get about 600 of those down where you know what it means, it's going to be a lot easier for you to connect words. It's going to be a lot easier for you to understand what you're looking at right away, rather than trying to look up words all the time. So, you know, anything that has osteo in it, you know immediately it's going to involve the bone, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of itis is going to be for your inflammation, okay? So that's the good part about learning those small parts of the words, because then you can, again, you can piece it all together, and it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to read the documentation, because you will understand what you're reading, rather than I'm just looking for the code. I just want to learn how to code blue. Not code blue. My name is Blue, but I just want to learn how to code. How do I do that? You have to learn what you're reading first, because you have to be able to comprehend the documentation before you start selecting codes. Otherwise, you're not going to know what to select, because you may end up missing something if you just try to hurry up and learn how to look up codes in the book and be out of school. That's not the way that it works. You're setting yourself up to fail if you do not take the time to learn medical terminology. So start with your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. You can actually Google a list of common prefixes, suffixes, and root words from Google. And it will give you tons of websites that you can go to just to start learning. Get flashcards so you can make your own. You can go to, I was going to say the dollar store, but now that they've upped the price to $1.25, you can go to the $1.25 store and get a deck of index cards so that you can make your own flashcards. When you connect your mind and your body, you're able to recall things a lot faster, because you're engaging that part of your brain and your memory, and it's going together better, rather than sitting here just staring at your phone and doing the flip cards on your phone. I never am ever going to recommend, like, oh, without doing book work first, I would never recommend going to an app. You know, apps are for supplement, right? And that's later on, once you've gotten down the basics. And I think that you can get basics better from books, actually looking at books. At least that's just my opinion, and that's the way that I learned. And my medical terminology game is pretty strong, you know. So that's why I share this with you, because that's how I learned. That's how it was easy for me. Everybody learns differently. So if you have to have your app, by all means, if it helps you to learn it, go ahead. But I'm just telling you that it's better, and you're going to learn it faster and for more long term if you just take the time to open up an actual book and write out some flashcards. Keep in mind, some of your coding books will have the manuals that you're getting your codes from. They will actually have a short list of prefixes, suffixes, and root words in it. So that way you can look in that as well and be able to reference things quickly. So if you take the time to look through your books, your ICD-10-CM, your CPT, your ICD-10 PCS manual, you'll be able to find a lot of those in there as well, and they're hidden in there. So just make sure that you take the time to look through, because if you don't have to burden yourself with trying to memorize all of these things because you know it's already in the book, that will help you. Hi, Shan. Hi, Cruz. But anyway, moving right along. So you're going to do that, right? And the amount of time that you spend learning medical terminology is really on you, but I would say when you're studying, go no more than 1 hour at a time. Some people only go 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and then they take a 10-minute break. Whatever works best, but I always say don't go past 1 hour because your retention of things is going to slip after 1 hour. So just keep that in mind. And you know, when we were kids, right? Or at least when I was a kid and I was in school, um, do you remember seeing like the alphabet? It was like the border on top of the room, right? It was all around the room. They had all the letters and everything, and they had it in print, and they had it in cursive, and they had it in order, so that way you can constantly see it. It's the same thing with medical terminology, and you can do the same thing with that. As far as like, okay, if you need to visualize, write them on flashcards so that way you can see it wherever your study area is. You can do that. You can also, one of the things that I have listed is the posters, the anatomy posters, because medical terminology and anatomy go together, okay? And so you can't learn one without the other. You have to learn them both. But medical terminology is where you're going to start at. But seeing anatomy posters is going to put that stuff in your mind, and having it around where you can readily see it regularly, and not just that it's in your book, because you have plenty of anatomy plates in your books depending upon the publisher. I always recommend Optum 360 Coding. Not an ad for them, but it is what I recommend. Now, when you have it up and you can see it, and I'm going to have to order some so that way I can have it in the back here too. When you constantly see it, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to recognize those words and know where in the body that is. And again, if you can visually see where it is in the body, it's going to help you to know, okay, this is what they're talking about. When they say the rotator cuff, I know the supraspinatus, I know that that's where that's part of that. And just by looking at pictures of those things. So do those things when you are taking the time to learn medical terminology and your anatomy. Keeping it up where you can see it is very easy to visualize. And so that's another thing that's going to help you to learn it quicker. The only other thing I can tell you guys is those flashcards and writing them yourself. And people always fight me on this. They say, well, no, I'm going to do my app. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and do your app. But you know, doctors who go to medical school and even nurses who go to nursing school all say the same thing. You do need to do those flashcards, because trying to skip out and trying not to learn it is not the way to go, folks. Don't do the shortcuts, because again, the long way is the fast way. The long way is the short way, or however you want to say it. Because taking the time to learn all that stuff rather than trying to jackrabbit right through it and not take the time to learn it is going to hurt you down the road. It's not a race, guys. It is literally a marathon. It is not a sprint. So I'm just letting you know now. We have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. And do not let that intimidate you. Do not let it scare you away from this field. I'm just letting you know the facts. This is what we have to do. Doctors get 10 to 15 years to be a doctor. And in that time, they are learning medical terminology. We get 9 months, 12 months, or 18 months. And some of these programs try to cattle herd people through programs in 4 months or 6 months. And which you see my eye twitching. That's too fast. Now you can say, well, Blue, I can learn it in that amount of time. How much are you grasping it if you're trying to learn it that fast? So that's why I'm telling you guys, take the time to learn medical terminology. And when you're going through, if you're going through self-study, or if you are going through a program and you're getting through that medical terminology portion, just because the medical terminology portion finishes, you get done with that portion of the program, does not mean that you have to stop learning it. So continue to go back over it even when you are advancing on to the next chapters or the next section of your program. Make sure you're still circling back to that medical terminology, because again, it's only going to benefit you more to be very advanced with medical terminology. If you look in these job listings for medical coders, a lot of them say the same thing. Candidate must know anatomy and medical terminology. This is not negotiable. And people have tried to write me and tell me, Blue, I don't want to learn anatomy, but I will put effort into learning medical terminology because I'm really excited about that. You can't have one without the other, folks. You can't. It's not negotiating. It's not deciding, oh, I only want to learn this and not this other thing. That doesn't make any sense, guys, and it's only going to hurt you when you do that. So embrace it. Embrace the fact that you have to learn medical terminology. If you get stuck on certain words or whatever, then you know that's where you have to concentrate. But the more you try to get out of it and oh, I hate it, if you have that in your brain already when you're looking at medical terminology, that's the worst thing that you can do, because then you're going to resist learning it. So that's why I'm telling you guys to start with the prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Do that. Learn those so that way you can piece together these words and you can know a lot more words rather than just a few hundred words that you try to memorize. Don't memorize whole words. You know, it's all about the connectedness of this language. This language changes. It's very fluid. It does not stay the same, because, you know, something could be, you know, itis, or something could be whatever, Malaysia, the softening, you know what I mean? Like, it could be any of those things. So that's how you have to look at it, because conditions do change. So, Vioness says, yes, let the brain absorb. Yes, absolutely. So that's what you want to do. You have to take the time and you have to spend the time working with it. If you don't, it's only going to hurt you if you don't. But those are my tips for learning medical terminology. I went through medical terminology very fast because I enjoyed it. I liked working in the workbook and I liked doing all those things. I also recommend, when you're working through a workbook, to read the questions first before you start this section, before you start reading the section, because at least you'll have it already in your mind what they're looking for, what are the answers going to be that you should be on the lookout for when you are looking at the questions first and then starting to read the section. Okay, so again, it's not about memorizing whole words, but parts of words so that you can piece it all together. Hi, Karen. Thank you for all the blue hearts. Thank you for joining me. So, any questions about medical terminology? I went through that one pretty fast. No? But like I said, medical terminology and anatomy, keep those posters up. Keep them where you can see them. And don't get, you know, burdened with just looking at huge, complicated books. The books that the materials that I'm going to be leaving in the description box are, one of them is a word search for nurses. And I put that in there because with the word searches, it's putting the word in front of you. And if you kind of already know it, then it's having that fresh in your mind. The other one that I really like, I'm going to put a bunch of stars next to it because I really did like this. It's a Grey's Anatomy word search. And the way that they have it is they wrote out like a whole paragraph, and they wrote like the big words. Well, they wrote them in caps is what I meant to say. And those are the words that you're going to be looking for in the puzzle. And as you're learning from that passage, and then you use that to use for your word bank for your word search. So I thought that was pretty cool. You know, when I on my Patreon channel, I do crossword puzzles. I do some word searches, and I've done it before, but I thought word searches would be so easy for people to do, so that's why I didn't really put too much thought into doing those. I figured crossword puzzles would be more helpful because that's how I learned. My mom used to do those for me when I was in school. So it's literally going through and looking at the definitions, and then you're trying to come up with a word. So, I mean, that's a crossword puzzle. And to me, that helps strengthen my medical terminology because you're constantly having to think on your feet when you're looking at those crossword puzzles. And it's so satisfying when you get them finally done. Anything else, any other ones, like I see in like the newspaper, I cannot get them. Medical terminology ones, I can. So I post those on my Patreon channel. because I know that sometimes learning medical terminology can be boring. So I try to switch it up a little bit, and I do things like that on Patreon because that was how I learned, and that was how it was easier for me. Like I said, I do some word searches, but the word searches, the book that I recommend, the couple books that I recommend, they will be in the description box when I update this video. So just something fun to do. The anatomy coloring books are also helpful because that also incorporates learning your medical terminology along with anatomy. And again, you're engaging your mind and your brain with working on a coloring book. And yeah, while you may think it's a coloring book, it's actually pretty relaxing when you get your MAP pencils out and you start, playing in the coloring book. That was how I learned too. That was how that was a big help with my anatomy when I was studying anatomy. So I do recommend that strongly. If you're going to do that, just something to kind of do something different other than just looking at books and looking at flashcards. Lady says, hi Blue, medical terminology and anatomy, A&P, actually were my favorites. Mine too. Mist says, I actually bought the little flashcards of medical terminology. It's like 1,000, I think. I don't remember. Oh, good. That's awesome. And I have left like a lot of them. I kept getting this question last night. Hi, Ellen. Sorry. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the blue hearts. I was getting this question a lot last night, and I felt so bad because I had so many people last night. That was like one of the biggest crowds I've had, like consistently, and the conversation was really going, and I said, oh no, did I I didn't mean to not answer the question, but I do leave my book recommendations in the description box. So hopefully if they were watching last night, they picked that up as far as like, my recommendations are there, and that's what I would recommend. Because a lot of times people will look for what is an easy book. And sometimes I think, again, it's with the marketing when they say easy medical terminology or medical terminology 101 or for beginners or whatever. So you kind of have to watch. Again, you can learn just as much by Googling, right, for medical terminology. And I just want to sneeze. They have like a whole list of terms. Like when you're looking for, I did one on phobias, right? And I actually did the exercise on my Patreon channel. It was a whole list of phobias. And it's every phobia you could come up with. And I was like, wow, that is really neat. But again, it's piecing together those words. And how fun is that, right? At least I thought it was fun. But yes, when you do things like that to engage your brain, it makes learning medical terminology a lot easier than, again, just going through a workbook. But don't be taken by medical terminology for coders. I've never liked that book. I've never liked any of them that say that, because to me, that's just a marketing gimmick. And it's the same thing. If you look at other medical terminology books, it's literally the same thing. What are they doing? Mentioning coding in the book, and that's about it. It's not anything separate. It's not anything unusual. If you look in any of these other medical terminology books, again, they're exactly the same thing. And if you're in an area that has like Goodwill or like a Salvation Army thrift store, in their books, they have tons of medical terminology books sometimes. Sometimes you'll find other medical like workbooks and things like that. You can use those to help supplement your medical terminology studies as well. So think about that. Use different resources and different means. You don't have to spend a ton of money, guys. And like I said, I've seen that medical terminology for coders for like almost $90. I'm not spending $90 to learn the same thing that I can learn for $5 or $10, $19. Like I said, all of the books that I recommend on this list that I'm going to post here when I update this video are under $50. Miss says, I freaking love crossword puzzles. Me too. Craft says, should you try to learn any particular type of medical terminology first, like prefixes, root word, etc.? Yes, learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Then you can break down by specialty. Sandra says, anatomy and physiology and medical terminology are my favorites too. Yay! Nerds in the house. I love medical terminology and anatomy. That was my favorite. I got through that really fast. Kraft says, I'm afraid I might get them confused as to which one is the prefix. You can't. Once you start studying it, you literally cannot. You're not going to think itis is a prefix. You're not, because no medical term starts with itis. No medical term starts with itis. Okay, so it's not something that you're gonna be able to look at it and you'll know, okay, which one is prefix, which one is suffix, and which one is root word. You will be able to know. Don't count yourself out yet. Hi Floor, she says, hi Blue, I was watching the Patreon channel catch up, lol. Thank you for the blue heart. Dina says, hi Blue, thank you for the blue hearts, happy new year. It's a little late. It's okay, we're all here. We're all here still. Yeah, so that's what that's what I tried to do on Patreon. I try to change it up and try to make it fun. I might have to refire that those phobia ones. I think it was either a puzzle that I did, or it was something else, or it may have been like some other matchup game. I may have been like a matchup game, but anyway, that's what I did for those. So very, just different things that you learn. But yes, learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words first, and then it's going to make learning the specialties a lot quicker. And I try to think about like the different things, like if I'm going to concentrate on the body, I'm going to do anatomy first, and then I'm going to work on procedures next, and then I'm going to work on, all these other things. But if you don't understand something, keep a medical dictionary nearby, or just, Google the answer, Google whatever word you don't understand. That's okay too. It's okay to Google the medical terms, because even I still do that, even still today. Sometimes I have to be reminded, like I know what the word is, but I forget too. And, it's something that we all go through. Again, it's a constant learning thing. So don't run from medical terminology. Do not run from it, because you need it. And you need anatomy too. And keeping those posters up where you can see them. Even if you have the old coding books, here's the thing, right? Okay, check this out. So if you have like some of your old, if you were lucky enough to have your ICD-10 PCS book, right? In the back, they have the anatomy plates. And if you can't afford right now to get anatomy plates from like Amazon or something like that, look what they have in the back. So if you have your new coding book, right, then take these out of the back and then just put them up where you can see them. There's plenty of really good information still in these old books. That's why I never like to throw my books away. If I do anything with them, I pass them on to somebody else that I know that's going to get into medical coding or who needs it, and that's what I'll do. But I will not throw them away, because if I want to keep something up like the anatomy plate, that's a perfect thing, because this book is getting its full use. It's not, just being tossed aside just because it's a year old. It still has valuable information in it. So keep those things up, put them up where you can see them. So that way, again, it goes back to how we learned as kids. That little border all around the ceiling in the room in your classroom had the alphabet on it. It's the same thing that you have to do with your medical terminology and anatomy. Put it where you can see it. Charlene says, it's difficult to keep track of all the other medical terminology, and it's easy to get thrown off with ones that are similar. Throws me off every time. Medical terminology can get confusing for me. And sometimes it's just that one little thing that can change the meaning of a word completely. And so that I understand. I totally get that. But the more practice you get, the more you're going to get proficient in, like, okay, there's these two similar words, and I know if this couple of letters changes, it's going to change the entire meaning of this word. So totally, that means that you have to practice. That's the practice part of it. When you see it, yeah, it gets confusing, and sometimes it's hard when it's not in context. So another trick you can do with medical terms is actually put them into sentences yourself, right? So that way it'll be easier for you to recall. And if you're reading it from a passage in a book, or if you have to even Google, like, how do I use phlebitis in a sentence, and it'll give you a sentence, then you can write that down, or you can change it to whatever you think that would be helpful for you to remember, so that way you can always have that word association. And that is just something that you can do to be proactive. The more you put yourself into those scenarios of having to actually look at the words or use the words in a sentence, the better off you're going to be. It's just like learning a new language. Literally, it is like learning a new language. What do you do when you're learning a different language, like Spanish, right? When when I have to brush up on my Spanish because my Spanish is very rusty, what I do is I literally watch a DVD, and I will listen to it in the language that I need to pick up on, like Spanish. I will listen to it in Spanish. I'll have the subtitles in English so I know what they're saying, and that kind of puts that back into my head. So that's me using those in a sentence, those words in a sentence, so that way I can recall it easier. It's the same thing with medical terminology. If you're getting stuck on those words that are very similar, ask Google to put it into a sentence for you and use that to recall, or change it to your own sentence, and write it down so that way that you can work on that. And it helps, trust me. It's a little bit more work, yes, but it does help you to be able to recall, because there's nothing better than actually using stuff in a sentence. That's why with my Patreon channel, I'm doing the E&M Genesis right now, which is literally going back to the beginning of E&M and starting from history and physical, and then review of systems, and then anatomy. Not anatomy, but physical exam. And so I'm having everybody that's there is participating actually go through on the worksheets and write out what they think would fall into that category. So again, it's not just me telling them, oh, it's this, this, and this. It is them actually writing it out for themselves. And then when I show my answers, then it becomes like, oh, okay, yes, my answer was similar, or no, my answer was way off. I need to ask this question. You have to be able to engage, and that is what learning this new language is going to be all about. When you are reading, it's not enough to just start reading these huge complex op notes. It's actually taking the time to work through that language yourself, so that way it is easier to understand when you're looking at it later on. Oh, I know what trocars means. Or, oh, I know what it means when they say that they anesthetize, they put the patient under anesthesia, right? And so you're going to understand what all of that means. And it's not going to be like, huh? Like, what? I don't get what they mean by they did an incision and they threaded the cannula and all this. You're going to understand what it means because you've actually used it in a sentence. So using crossword puzzles, using word searches, putting things into sentences, doing games, all of that really does help. And so those are proactive measures that you can do to learn medical terminology. The stronger you are with medical terminology, the better. When you start looking at anatomy and you start looking at words that mean the same thing. If a patient has a torus fracture, it's the same thing as saying that the patient has a buccal fracture. So it's knowing your medical terms and seeing the similarities and what's going on and how they're synonyms for certain words, right? Hallux valgus, yes, is a bunion. But how would you know that if you didn't know medical terminology, right? So it becomes a game. It becomes a game. So it's going to take practice, and you can't expect to learn it overnight. I didn't expect to learn Spanish overnight. It's the same way you guys can't expect to learn medical terminology overnight, or your anatomy. It is repetition. That's what it is. The key to adult education is repetition. And that is no truer words were ever spoken, because when you think about it, you're having to learn not just your medical terminology and your anatomy, but you have to learn pathophysiology as well. And that pathophysiology is like the disease process and how it all starts, and what is it all? It's all connected. So when you start doing that, you you advance little by little by little, but you have to get that medical terminology down first and your anatomy down. So that way it'll make sense. Because otherwise, if you try to jump to the end, it's not going to make sense. At least that's what I would suggest anyway. So the long way is the fast way. Adriana says, a confusing one for me was cellulite and cellulitis. Boy, that was fun. And see, right? So, okay, there's a good way to think of that, right? So, I mean, we have all seen those commercials for like, oh, if you have this cream for cellulite, right? But if you have like, there's an infection, right? Okay, cellulitis, because it's inflamed, right? That's what that itis means. So, Zina Marie says, hi, Blue, Happy New Year. Glad you're back and I have something to listen to. Oh, thank you for all the blue hearts. Well, I'm always glad to be here. And I'm glad you all are tuning in. I'm so like thankful. You know, last 2 days have been really great with views. Last night was like on. I mean, like there were so many people. I was so surprised. I was like, oh yay. I shouldn't be, right? I should be all cool. Like, yeah, you know, it's always like that. But you guys know me, I keep it real. So I'm just glad everybody is tuning in. Thank you. Medical terminology is very important. And so is anatomy. So if I can help one student by anything that I say, by trying something different, you know, if your approach, you feel like your approach is not helping you to learn, you feel like it's just so much, try something different. You know, try to do those things like I'm suggesting, you know, those crossword puzzles or the word searches. On my Facebook page, right? Which I was never really wanting to do a Facebook page, but I did it because y'all wanted it, y'all requested it. So I said, okay. So I have Facebook at Medical Coding with Blue. But if you go on there and you look on the thread or whatever, I did post a sample crossword. Yeah. So take advantage and look at that and work through that. And I give the answers on there too. So there's all kinds of worksheets on there that I'm using as a sample. So that way you guys can see what I do on my Patreon channel. Patreon is meant for all of those coding things and for the games and all the puzzles and stuff like that. So that's what I do more on there. But I recommend if you're wanting to do something fun, join my Patreon channel or check out those books that I'm going to be listing in the description box. So you can check out at your bookstore, your local bookstore, or if you can go to the library, if your library is open in your area. I know not everybody's library is back open, but if you're lucky enough, check out a medical terminology book there, guys. You know, you can do that. You can take certain words and certain things, like in certain specialties like cardio or neuro or ortho, and you can start to practice little by little by little. Practice chapter by chapter by chapter, because if you try to jump in and not really have a path, like where do I start first? Start with your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Then you go by specialties. And so that will help you to learn better that way, I think, because it's more organized. And I think what overwhelms people is that there's so much medical terminology. And how do you recall it all? You don't. You keep repeating it. And it will be easier to recall after a while once you keep repeating it. But people fail their medical coding exams because they're not strong in medical terminology. They fail their medical coding exams because they have not been reading enough so that they have that speed. And when you have that speed, then you've got some a little bit of power, right? Especially if you've never been a medical coder before, you've only been in school. So practicing on your reading speed will also help, and you will do that by working on your medical terminology and even, you know, your anatomy stuff. If you get tired of reading, there's channels like JJ Medicine on YouTube, which I highly recommend, and I recommended them many, many times. And they talk about everything from medical terminology to anatomy and also different conditions. They give little short clips, little 4-minute clips, because I know people have that little short, they like the little TikTok type deals, where people are giving information very quickly. I don't work very quickly, so a lot of times that does not work for me. However, I do like the way JJ Medicine does their channel. And again, it is very helpful. So you can just literally sit and listen to it. And it's just little short clips, and it talks about anatomy and medical terminology, and you know, it has it all right there for you and everything. So that I recommend, and that's free, guys. You know, us YouTubers, you know, we do things, and you know, it's there, it's free. So I hope that you'll show us all some love and give us a thumbs up, you know, because that supports us, and supports channels like mine, channels like JJ Medicine. So that way, you know, they know, hey, there's people out there that are actually benefiting from what I'm doing. You know, we do things to help you guys to learn. Now, I don't know JJ Medicine personally, but I have seen what I have seen. They've really helped me because of like things that I needed to learn. I'm like, oh, okay, I went right there, and they had a video on it. So I mean, it's helpful. And again, if you want to check it out, it's JJ Medicine. Very helpful website, on channel on YouTube. So have you found anything that you have found that was helpful? Any of my people that really love medical terminology? What did you find helpful? Maybe if you want to share with those that are in here that may be struggling. I know sometimes it's always good when, you know, the audience shares like a book that they know or something like that, because it's not just me saying, you know, oh, this is good or that's good, you know. Like it's like I said with the apps. Sometimes it's good for supplementation, like after you've started having your ground foundation of knowledge with medical terminology. Getting into those apps is a good thing. I've just never really been into apps. So, but there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them out there for medical terminology. And some you may find that are very similar. And, you know, some that you may find that you really like, you know, and some are just really detailed. And you know, some are really kind of boring and some are more fun. So it really all depends on who's creating it. Like I said, the ones that I'm suggesting, all those books, they're all under $50. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to learn medical terminology at all. So that would be my recommendation. But I like that. I like that. So when I first started hearing that people didn't like medical terminology, I was like, what? That was like the easiest part, you know. Medical terminology and anatomy were like the easiest. It was everything else that was like, okay, this presents a little bit of a challenge because this is really new. But anatomy, I always thought it was one of the easier ones, and so was medical terminology. So. Any other questions? Because I think I covered everything and how I learned medical terminology anyway. So hopefully it's helpful for you guys, since there were no suggestions. Tomorrow is going to be resume tips for people who are coming from a different profession into medical coding for the first time. Okay. So lots of tips I will be giving tomorrow about that. So if you are needing to brush up on your resume, that will be covered tomorrow. So I will be airing my show at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is the norm for me. I have new shows out every weeknight at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Flora says medical terminology is fun. I really enjoy it. I learn every time I am reading assignments. Oh, see, I love that. I love people who enjoy the medical terminology part of it, because again, I thought that was the most fun. Medical terminology and anatomy. So, all right. But yes, that's going to be the show for tomorrow. Resume tips. So if you're interested in that, I hope you get your pen and paper out. Thank you for the blue hearts, Tanika. I appreciate that. So, okay. That was a quick show. I felt like it was quick, even though it's not technically quick. All right. Nothing else? All right. Well, if you're interested in checking out my Patreon channel, it is patreon.com/Medical Coding with Blue. And I will be leaving that link in the description box if you're interested in checking out the channel. The minimum pledge is $10. You don't have to pledge past a month, but it does give you access to all the things that I have posted. So you have plenty of things to play with as far as like exercises goes for medical terminology and anatomy and and even coding. So Justin, I thought of listening to audiovisual as a way of getting more exposure. See, like I said, JJ Medicine is the best alternative if you get tired of looking at books and flashcards. Justin, Blue, there are good resources on the medical aspect of it. What good resources are available for information about the healthcare industry itself? There's a lot, but I mean, this was just about medical terminology today, so I don't want to throw people up more because I do have those other books, but again, that's a whole nother list. This is just about the medical terminology. Shan, what do you use to make the crosswords? A website. So, all right. Well, if that's all there is to it, yeah, I will talk about other resources to learn, Justin, like that the ethics, the medical law and ethics book, which I hope you all are checking out if you can, because that one covers a lot of things that you need to know, like high tech and HIPAA and all that other good stuff. It's all in that one book, and it's medical law and ethics for healthcare professionals. So, hi, Minnie, I'm doing great. Thank you for joining me. But yeah, so, this is something to, check into, look at, because everything is all under, and that goes and covers the regulatory and compliance. So, but, alrighty, I guess I will go ahead and close this up. Give this a thumbs up if it helped you. If you think it can help somebody else, I hope that you will share it. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope that you do. And I will see y'all again tomorrow. And you're welcome, Justin. All right. So I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.